Jesus Christ and the parable of the yeast. Picture yourself on a warm, sunny day in ancient Palestine. The crowd is large, filled with people from all walks of life. Farmers, merchants, mothers, children, gathered to hear Jesus speak. His words are magnetic, and his stories are unlike anything they've ever heard before. Jesus often used common everyday activities to reveal profound truths about God. This time, he chooses something so ordinary that it's easy to overlook: baking bread. As Jesus begins to speak, he draws his listeners into a story about a woman working with yeast and flour. For his audience, this is a familiar scene. Bread making was a daily task in most households. But as always, Jesus uses the ordinary to reveal the extraordinary. Let's dive into this parable and understand how it speaks to us today. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough." That was Matthew chapter 13, verse 33. Now, at first glance, this might seem like a simple observation about baking, but there's a hidden richness in these words. Let's break it down. So, yeast is tiny, so small it's almost invisible to the naked eye, yet its power is undeniable. When mixed into dough, it doesn't stay small. It causes the dough to rise and grow beyond its original size. Similarly, Jesus teaches us that the kingdom of heaven often begins in the smallest, humblest of ways. Think about Jesus himself, born in a stable, raised in a small town, starting his ministry with a small group of disciples. Yet, his life and teachings have transformed the world. The kingdom's beginnings may not always be grand or noticeable, but its impact is limitless. So think about that. In your own life, what small things might God be asking you to do? It could be a kind word to someone in need, a prayer whispered in faith, or a small step of obedience. These acts may seem insignificant at first, but they hold the potential to grow into something extraordinary. Now, when yeast is mixed into flour, something remarkable happens. Though the yeast is invisible, it transforms the entire dough from within. The change is not just surface level, it goes deep, altering the dough's very nature. This is how the kingdom of heaven works in us. When we invite God into our lives, his Spirit begins to transform us, not just in our actions, but in our hearts, our values, and our character. This transformation starts small, but eventually touches every part of who we are. So think about that. Ask yourself, am I letting God's love and grace transform me from the inside out? Don't just focus on outward appearances or actions. Let God work on your heart, your thoughts, and your attitude. The process of yeast working through dough isn't instant. It takes time, and so does the work of the kingdom in our lives and in our world. Now, this can be hard for us, especially when we long to see immediate results. But Jesus assures us that the kingdom's work is steady, certain, and completely unstoppable, even if we don't see it right away. Think about the farmer who plants a seed and waits for it to grow. The farmer doesn't dig it up every day to check its progress. Instead, they trust the process. Similarly, God calls us to trust that he is at work, even when we can't see it. So ask yourself, are there areas in your life where you feel impatient or discouraged? Remember that transformation does take time. Trust God's process and stay faithful, even when results aren't immediately visible. So, in this parable, the woman mixes yeast into 60 pounds of flour. Now that's an enormous amount, enough to make bread for over 100 people. The message here is clear. The kingdom's influence is vast. It starts small, but it doesn't stay confined. Its impact is meant to reach the whole world. Think about the early church. It began with just a handful of believers, but it grew to spread across nations and generations. That same power is still alive today. The love, grace, and truth of God's kingdom are meant to overflow from our lives into the lives of others. So ask yourself, how are you sharing the kingdom's influence with others? Through your actions, your words, and your relationships, you can be a part of God's plan to reach and transform the world. So, this parable of the yeast challenges us to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. It reminds us that God's kingdom doesn't rely on grand gestures or immediate results. Instead, it works quietly, persistently, and powerfully, transforming us and the world from the inside out. So, as you leave today, I encourage you to reflect on this question. Where is the yeast of the kingdom at work in your life? Maybe it's in the small, unnoticed ways God is shaping your character. Or maybe it's in the seeds of kindness, hope, and faith you are planting in others. Or maybe it's in a call to be patient and trust that God is working, even when you can't see the results. Remember, the kingdom of heaven is like yeast, small, hidden, and transformative. Through God's grace, we are not only recipients of this transformation, but also agents of it. Let's be faithful and allow the yeast of God's kingdom to rise in us and through us, so that His love can reach the world. Now, go out today with this truth in your heart. No matter how small or slow it seems, God's work is unstoppable, and through you, His kingdom is rising. Amen. Thank you for joining me today, my friends. Tomorrow I'll come back with another parable of Jesus, or another of Jesus's parables, rather, and I can't wait to see you. Take care. I hope you have a beautiful day. Talk to you tomorrow.